Good morning, TJ. Welcome back to the book replay. You're one of our OGs. Welcome back. Thank you so much.
Woohoo!
Thank you so much.
I'm glad I've published enough to be a returning guest. It's a good. It's a reminder that it's not enough to release one book. If you want to show up on the replay more than once, you have to publish again and again and again. I'm working on publishing another one soon, so that I'll keep coming back to the book replay.
First billing, please. First billing. I'm here. I'll hound you. I'll beg you for time.
Yeah, maybe I'm the one that's opening the question because I'm curious about how do you think about time? Like, what does time mean to you? I know that your brain is exploding now. I'm asking because how you arranged your Lolway short story. Like, I remember seeing the draft in terms of like what you felt should come at the beginning of the story with Bena. So you said to open with we move into darkness, and then the next thing we're doing is my last book, and then you jumped over my second book. So, like, I'm curious about what time means to you.
I think of time literally as a river. The river is carrying things towards different grounds. The river is not just a straight river, it's sort of like cyclical. It's like a swirl. It started from a point and it is going around and is expanding. So we are basically going at the same point, but we are going at different circumferences. So that's
Yeah.
There's a particular time that something happens. When you miss it, you just have to wait for that thing to happen again for you to do that particular thing. But we won't fade into darkness. Around that time, we have like a very good speculative fiction time in Nigeria. I think one of the best-selling books of last year in Nigeria is a speculative fiction book. It's basically fantasy. I was doing the Moon Fade into Darkness so that I could document where I felt like speculative fiction really started being Nigerian for me and for like a lot of people. And when I was checking, I was seeing somebody from Nigerian University did a study on Moon Fade into Darkness and was calling other studies. And in 2025 too, and I was like, oh, there's a fresh wave of killings that happened in Nigeria around that time. And then there was now this whole thing of, Trump talking about, oh, they are killing Christians in Nigeria. And everybody was having conversations. And in my head, I was like, first, people live here. And I was like, oh, shit, where did I hear that? Oh, it was from this book. And then two, do you people know that people live here? Like, do you know what is even happening? Because the conversations were just based. And I was like, I just wish somebody would pick up this book and read and first calm down. Because those people that are there, their problems are different first. And then there's also the question of aid workers. The people that should be leading the conversation on what's happening in those places, I felt like we should start talking to aid workers in the first place because they have been there. And this is kind of like the journal, essentially, of an aid worker. So I was like, oh no, we have to talk about this. So yeah.
Oh! Hey! Take me! God, take me! Ah! Hey! I have ascended. I have ascended. And I know this looks like a good soundbite, but I really have like, this is, oh my God. See, like I have like multiple, and I guess this will be a way for me to preempt the questions you might be want to ask. But like, I have like multiple responses to like, the last 2 minutes of things you said, because like one, starting from the end, because it was written in first person, it becomes that journal, literally, right? Like it becomes, the son collects his mom's writings together and then put them in one place. But then the book went through versions where there was a point where it was in third person, there was a point where all the characters had their narrative points. And this was because I had sent the work out. First of all, it's the first book I wrote and finished, and I wanted to write a book that people wouldn't be able to resist, right? Like, that I've seen people talking about rejection. I'm going to write a book that like is going to make it hard for people to say no to. And it came in first person, and I submitted to a big publishing house in 2014. I started writing it during the year of my IT, 2013. I was writing it in my office because like, we had constant electricity there. So I finished the drafts. I sent it out to some, a Nigerian publisher at the time that was very big. They liked it, and oh my God, and then I had all these fantasies. I saw a couple of big writers that they had published as well, and I started feeling like, oh my God, this could be me, right? Like, I wanted a book that would help me pay rent once I finished my degree, because IT is the second to last year before you graduate. 1 year later, the publisher reached out. They were like, they've got a new management, whatever, that I should resend it again. I sent it again. Then they were 6 months later, they were like, oh, that they don't like the first person, I should switch it back. I'll switch it back, and they will promise me, and they're sending me contracts. We did this dance for like 4 years, right? And I gave up on the book, and I was like, okay, I guess this is going to be a book. Every writer, they say, has a book that never got published. They just like that first book that they just like. So I thought that was what was going to happen to me. But in 2020, after working on the Madhouse, editing the Madhouse with my South African editor, and because of how it's like backward, forward, backward, forward, backward, forward, editing the Madhouse, we did feel like a full workshop because my editor, she got like a roll of receipts, those things, those roll papers they put in receipts printers. And then she was like, okay, she doesn't want me to collapse everything into a linear timeline, but she wants to make sure that nobody will be able to point fingers if they said to take it apart. So we took it apart. This year, this happened. This president died, This year, this happened. This year, this happened. We brought everything out. Editing the Madhouse taught me how to edit People Live Here. So when I was done with it, I felt like my brain was just like still burning and sharp. And so I was like, okay, like I edit this book, I can do anything. And if I can do anything, I can go back to People Live Here and look at it again. And I did. And the funny thing is, I realized that the book needed to go back to the original version it was in, which was first person. And then with my maturity, like it fell from like 100 and something thousand words to 66 or so. Because I had learned from the Madhouse that like, if something happens in one section, if I want to mirror it in the next, it should truly be a mirror, not a repetition, right? So that helped me edit People Live Here. But the question about how People Live Here began, I had just started my IT. My uncle was giving me a drive to where I was doing my IT in town, as we say in Abuja. On the radio, gosh, I miss that era of listening to radios. Like it's still carried on to like even like buses. I really miss radio, mostly because we didn't have electricity. But anyway, we listened to radio in the car, and there was a report about some doctors that had been killed in Potiskum. And I was just like, they literally came to help and they were killed. I started like paying attention to NGOs, human rights organizations that were working in northern Nigeria. Then I was seeing foreigners working in these spaces, resigning from their jobs, even when they paid lucratively. I was reading about like health workers will go to northern Nigeria and get checked into psychiatric hospitals themselves. And I was like, this is crazy. Like in that idea or that mythology, to return back to that like conversation you raised in our last session about myth and what kind of myths are people building. In the construction that had been fed to me of one Nigeria, as someone who was born in Abuja, I realized that we didn't know anything about those on the periphery, and especially far north. Years later, when I would go for my NYSC and get posted to Taraba, then the things that I was, getting precursors to the news about the doctors killed in Potiskum, that world would then be open to me when I was in Taraba. Yeah, that was the starting point for me. I wanted to know, why will people who came to help be killed? What is going on? Like, this is beyond conspiracy at this point. But yeah.
After reading People Live Here, I immediately jumped back to the first draft again and continued from where I stopped. I think I stopped at like page 88. And then I think I started to see the growth. I started to see how much different you were as a writer back then and what the idea of the book was.
Wait, you have the first draft of People Live Here?
Yeah, I have The Color of
How?
Silence. Yeah. It's in my email. I saved it in my Google Drive. So I'm like, whenever.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I'm actually so
crazy. I sent it to you.
Yeah, you sent it to me, and I couldn't read. I apologize for not reading it then. I saw the essential first draft mistakes. I saw that thing you said about how you start a story from where you know what happened instead of creating the suspense. I was like, oh, right there. I saw the repetitions. Don't get me wrong, it was good, So yeah.
that observation that you probably have, I've not even seen it in years. I really love that. You could see that at least I'm not a false prophet. I was practicing what I preached. Like you saw where the first draft was, like what yeah. Oh my God! Wow, you have that.
I do. Why did you call the first draft The Color of Silence?
That was the title I had. And what do you want me to do? That was the title I had. We work
Okay.
with what we have. I was 23, 22. I was trying to build a title based from the book, right? Like, trying to, like, define what the book was. Then I came up with that radio station that people are tuning to hear what's happening. And the silence was meant to be, they were, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, let's see. I don't know what to tell you. That was what I had at the time. That's
No,
so funny. Okay.
that's fair. That's fair. I It's a working title because I think any publisher, what their source would have changed it from The Color of Silence because there was really nothing silent even from the first draft. And I think that maybe it's because I'm looking at it back from here. I think the first thing for me was People Live Here sounds like a scream. When did you know that this book was going to be called People Live Here? Then I saw a line in the book where they write People Live Here. But I was like, I think it's a
But
lot more deeper than that. What was the journey from that?
it literally was that though. I think the line came in the rewrites.
Yeah, it came in the rewrite, definitely.
My protagonist, Kanulia, was coming from that because she wasn't upper class. People were people. I wrote that line and I was like, this is, people live here. I only came by that line after I had gone to those margins. Like, I didn't know that people lived there, right? Because, like, you are just in Abuja and, like, Taraba is, like, far away or, like, this place is far away and, like, you don't imagine, you just allow, there are all these stereotypes and there are all these stories or mythologies again that are being, like catch-all be-all terms for all those people. So I could have only come by that title after I had gone to Taraba and experienced what I experienced. Yeah, that's so interesting. I'm only realizing this now.
Her name wasn't even Kanulia, it was Adaobi Olivia Madweke.
Ah!
Yeah. And so,
Oh
and for me,
God,
that felt
yes.
like she was like pure Igbo. But when she now becomes Kanulia Madweke, and then there was now the whole Thief Igbo thing, and I was like, is it that at that time you had settled into the melange of tribes that in Nigeria? Because I know there's actually like a very, very good, would I say, meshing together of Tiv and Igbo people because of Benue and Enugu. So yeah, why did you change her name? Hey, one more thing, even Hugo Di Lorenzo, because Hugo Di Lorenzo is such a badass name. What were the thoughts behind all of those?
The name change. So first of all, and this is a larger thing. In fact, I almost started the thread about this on Twitter the other day, but the world has other pressing demands. Being born in Abuja specifically or in a major city center, your default is the, in quotes, major tribes, right? Only one kind of people are allowed to be visible in media and what have you. And what that does subconsciously then is that, like, even as a creative person, you can't even imagine your own self in media. Like, when you're now constructing, characters or themes, your stuff has to be set in Lagos. Your default is, Adaobi, Obinna, Emeka, they are now like stock characters. And for me, that is kind of part of the colonial project, right? Because I found out around the time that, like, I think Tiv people were like, was it 4 million or so in the Nigerian population at the time when I was like doing this, and I was like, do I want major studio or major writers to start like thinking about, in quotes, minority tribes, or am I just going to have to do that in my work? And this goes into why I created the Daco people. If you don't belong to the majority tribes, then your reality is not real. You don't have any truth. Your experience is false, right? So if they say, oh, there's a Christian genocide, then you are worshipping your traditional, whatever in Taraba or Benue, then your reality doesn't exist. You are adjusted to the nearest majority,
Yeah.
right? And so, if I was going to keep the character Igbo, I had to find names that were kind of like original or like at least not too affected by the whole contemporary colonial whatever. I didn't even know what Kanulia meant. I heard the sound in my head and I really liked it. I mean, it's kind of how I came up. I did Jidena in my short story collection, and then that became the title of the story. And then I found out the title, what the Jidena actually meant, the whole embracing the father. I think it's someone else who told me what Kanulia actually meant, and I was like charmed by it. As of People Live Here, I didn't feel the need to like make her Tiv necessarily, but then she was going to be from Tivland because, again, like you said earlier, the Enugu Tiv something is very strong. In the most interior part of Benue, you would find an Igbo man, literally doing business. There's something about the consonants in Igbo that work well with Tiv. Igbo people speak Tiv so well, even though they are very very, very different tribal nations, right? But the Igbos who come to Tivland and learn Tiv, it really becomes part. It's crazy. I wanted to have that bring that interaction between Tiv Igbo that happens in Benue because literally Benue is next to Enugu, and I'm curious about even during the Civil War what that meant because if they were going to be like this secession, then it would have been after Benue, right? So, and at the same time, even when you're looking at the jihad war and how the Muslim jihad was spreading, it literally stopped at where we are on the map. We had the Battle of Ushongo, where the Tiv people used, poisoned arrows, bees. They come up with some things, so the jihad stopped. The change was to be bring in more of my reality or my experience into the book because I just decided that the middle belt where I am from is important enough to be told in a story or to be seen in a story because it's interesting. It's so fascinating to me. So it's a way for me to fight that default in my head.
The language here, I found it a lot more
Fair.
compelling than in Madhouse. And I think it's because of the efficiency. It felt like you had finally settled into yourself being a Nigerian person from the Middle Belt that had grown in Abuja. Someone literally called it that this was written in Abuja English. I was reading this. I was thinking of it was really good join.
But I mean, unfortunately, it has also been part of why it got rejected in other parts of the world. But I had the good fortune of finding an editor, Tahira. She started mentioning that this is Nigerian English. This is Abuja specifically English. And you might think it's the same all through, but if you go to Lagos, things like nylon or Santana leather or they are actually regional whatever, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, I don't think you might have seen it in the Call People of Silence draft you had when you first read it. Maybe it was there, right?
It was there. There were essences of it there, but it was perfected beautifully, man.
When I was coming back to edit People Live Here or rewrite it, I wanted to be okay, what does a lower middle class person in Abuja sound like? For me, I love it when a writer is able to vary themselves. Something I want to fight is I want to make sure people don't read my books and feel, oh, this was when he was 20 years old. Oh, this was when he was 30 years old. This was when he was 40 years old, right? I want to make sure every single thing you read from me is born out of its own time. I don't believe in theological time, right? So having People Live Here already written was so helpful because I didn't have to have the whole second book course that writers do. It's where this first book was awesome. What are people going to think about the second book? I love that you really felt connected to People Live Here because I feel the Madhouse has its whole worshippers and everything. I don't want to do a comparative book for you to think, oh, okay, let's compare it. No, I don't want to do that. If I'm doing a duology, and which I am right now, then I would try to sustain the language. But if it's different books, I want it to become something else. For me, writing is kind of like performance. I want to be able to vary myself, the self I'm bringing to my writing. Something that Sada Malufashi told me when he read The People Live Here was that he felt like it was talking to me. He really felt like talking to me because that's exactly how I sound. And I was so happy because I used the COVID lockdown to listen to, I was watching, Instagram content creators in Abuja. I started going out more. I was going to Village Chief. This was before COVID lockdown, right? I was going to all those places that Abuja creatives go. I had a couple of readings. I was paying a close attention to how Abuja people sounded like. And I kind of doubled down on it because I actually didn't talk like that per se. There was the whole conversation about how, I tried to sound learned because I was performing it. I tried to become Kanulea. So I was reading aloud and, in trying to be like the Nigerian. It was nice to be like, yes, this deserves to be on the page. And I feel like it helped with the gloomy subject matter, like having that like language. I feel like it gave this soft edge of comedy. Gosh, I felt like I really felt like, okay, I'm a writer when I was rewriting in my house, because there are comedic places or there are funny places. I was like, okay, I did that. I guess I guess I guess this is
True.
yeah, I'm going to have to just own that I'm a writer. I have to shed off that aspiring writer title that we all had at the time. I wanted to make sure that there wouldn't be any comparisons between the Madhouse and People Live Here, or so it's a different thing. And the book that's going to come after that is going to be an entirely different shift, right? The book I just finished writing is also first person, but like it's from a 24-year-old boy's perspective. So I've been listening to some Gen Z podcasts. I'm so inside the Gen Z lingo right now. I speak with my students all the time, right? So I'm not sure I would take myself seriously enough to be an actor in this lifetime, but I can do it on the page. So, yeah.
You've always been like a proponent of write how people sound. I remember the first time you looked down on my stories where like, do people in your life talk like that? I was like, oh, what's this one?
Oh my god!
I was like, what are we doing here?
Oh my god! Did I do that?
Yeah, 2013, I can't forget. And it was a park bench scene, and you were like, do people in your life talk like this? I was like, no, they don't, but what? Because, around that time, I was still like inside the whole westernization. I was still reading Western books, so
Yeah.
that was what would come out. I think so. That was the first time I got the consciousness that, wait, people in my life don't talk like this. And then I said, I took a step back to start watching like all of those meetings we used to attend. I was like, oh no. Nobody sounds polished. Nobody uses all of those witty sayings that we see on Nickelodeon in Nigeria. No.
Thank you for not cutting me off after I gave you that feedback.
It was really constructive. I think about it time to time. On still the text of People Live Here. I think when I was going through it the first time, I think I first got the sense that there were two narrators. It felt like Kanulia took a back seat. Something just stepped forward. It was still her narrating, but this thing was completely different. How I'll explain it is, one was there at the trauma, another one is referencing the trauma. At what point in this story did you realize that her mind was broken? Because I think when I got to page 77 on the book, I was like, this woman's mind is broken. The way she recalls things is completely different.
I think probably like in the second draft or so.
First draft, she's still like this wide-eyed romantic girl who's enjoying everything. All of that ended in the first 50 pages of this.
I realized that there had to be this narrative intervention, because for me in my life, there are several moments when I wish I had a witness. I wish I had someone who was experiencing reality from my perspective. And then that would make me less misunderstood. That would give me a confidence. For a while, I thought that person would have been my twin. And then we had the Madhouse. But really, you want someone who's seeing your side of things and can intercede for you. And different cosmologies would have different versions of that. You have the archangels, guardian angels, you'd have the chi, the personal chis, And so for me, that narrative voice that intervenes, I think the person stepped in twice in the book. That voice kind of like steps when there was the bombing in Yemen during the Arab Spring uprising. That voice takes over, right? And then takes her and the reader to her past. Right. It kind of like strips you down, impactful, instantaneous trauma. It kind of like strips you down in a way to your barest form. Like when I got hit by a car recently and I was taken to the emergency ward, the inner monologue voice, I wasn't doing the whole Shebi. No, it was this very crystal clear English. Even if a mind fractures, it has to continue in some form. Having that narrative voice intervene served as her silent witness, and to kind of like reintroduce the things that she didn't want to deal with, or things that she had pushed to the back of her mind.
Still, what was so fascinating about Yemen that you wrote about it for about 10 years? Because I remember you were going on about, oh yeah, it's about a nurse in Yemen, and I was like, what's happening in Yemen?
First of all, I love travel. Like I love going to places, and Yemen they have this very rich tradition. They had the salt market. I looked up on maps, but I was going on Google Maps and I was seeing streets. I was seeing like, this is where they sell, this is where they sell that. Yeah, I don't know if I'll ever have that kind of intensity again. Kind of did something similar to what Sharif and his family in the madhouse would do, where they would just get on a bus going somewhere without knowing where. The connection for me to Yemen was finding out that, Nigerian nurses / doctors get sent to, or missionary nurses and doctors get sent to places where there's like, devastation, right? And the more dangerous the situation, the higher the pay, the higher the risk payments. And so when I decided what the timeline was, she wanted money to take care of her son. So at the time, that was going to be the place where she would get the most pay. And so she went there. Then became a thing for me to look at the after and the before the uprising, and then I got to experience the culture. I went online, I tried to find people on Facebook who were from Yemen. I was hoping to start interacting with Yemeni people, and then learning Arabic. And then I was going to start, but then I started trying to learn one kind of Arabic. I think I was interacting with somebody from Lebanon, was it Facebook or so? But then he told me that actually Arabic they speak in Yemen is different from the Arabic they speak in Lebanon. It's different from the Arabic they speak in, And I was like, yikes, okay. I can't even, this is going to be, too much work. But it was still, again, that character performance thing of wanting to disappear into a role, right?
I can tell you about your love for places. I think I'll ask about places now. Even the chapters people live here, you start by placing them with places. There is Sana, there's the salt market. It was kind of like a motif that you built in there. I thought it was great. Tell me more about your relationship with place as an art form and then as a physical thing.
I have been displaced a lot especially in my childhood. My love of place, telling my parents, because they were extreme adventurers. They'll just come to my school one day and be like, "We are going to Guarara Falls, or we are going to Jos." And then it's this drive, and then there's bananas and granuts in the, father would get me comic books to read on the trip, and and then showing me, this is the signboard for this is the signboard for that, so I really memorized specifically the Abuja to Jos route. Like I really, really had it inside my head with the whole, this is the point where you turn. And it's beauty. If you're uncomfortable in a place, go elsewhere, right? Like if you feel stuck, if you feel trapped, changing your location is like hitting the refresh button. Changing location started from when I was a child, and then it became more forced after my parents died. I was in places where I really didn't want to be. I was taken to places where my parents didn't want me to go to. But the people who had custody of me decided that was what was best for me. And I was forced into so many places. Then when I started having some autonomy, I started going to places that I wanted to go to. So movement is always going to be a feature. Like a month after I came to the US, I had to attend a festival in Berlin. On the plane coming back, I was like, okay, we need to pause. Like we are doing too much traveling. Like this is too much. Like this is way too much. Last year, I started feeling the need to just be like, gosh, I need to be on a plane. I need to be on a plane, fly somewhere. Like, I've stayed still for too long. So
please don't stop traveling. No, we are living for those captions on those pictures of museum art. So please, please. Please.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. There's a section in the novel where Kanulia returns from Yemen, and in just 4 months like this, Abuja looks like they have destroyed it, which is something everybody who has been in Abuja, if you're in Abuja in before 2023, if you go back to Abuja now like this, you understand. You are definitely in that frame of mind. I was wondering if that's how you felt when you returned from, I think the residency in Scotland, or the thing you went for in Scotland?
I went to Scotland, then US, then I went back to Nigeria. Places for me to imagine freedom, right? Like movement, right? Like movement is so intense in all my books because I needed to be free and I wasn't free. I was writing from a place where trapped. Throwing my characters as far as possible. What gave me the capacity to do all those intense research about like looking at the map in Yemen. It's a way for me to like fantasize. I needed my characters in the madhouse to get on a plane and start a life somewhere in Germany or Netherlands because I wanted that for myself. My characters have gone ahead of me. A lot of what I write is sometimes aspirational as far as movement goes. I remember coming back to Nigeria. I was like, this is exactly how Cornelia felt when she came back, and like suddenly prices of things have jumped up. Corruption from immigration officers trying to extort you. It's even more perverse. Like, it's almost like you were seeing this before, but it's suddenly jarring, right?
Yeah.
But like, in fact, movement is so crucial because you're not able to experience time properly if you're in the same place. Like, you're not able to experience how things are changing. You step aside away for a bit before you come back. Transports, they were telling me suddenly 6,000 naira. The exchange rate is crazier, and then immigration officers trying to extort money from me. Now, when I came back to the US, vegetables had jumped $2. And this was just like 1 year. If you move, you are able to experience reality and time in a very interesting and, to me, frank and honest way. Whereas if you are inside the thing, you wouldn't be able to experience it fully until you step aside and come back. And that's why distance is a very necessary ingredient to desire. If you love something, to see it fully, you might step back a bit before you come back again. Coming back to Nigeria really made me realize how, okay, damn, like, and it was bad because I didn't know how to be a good, policeable citizen for the police, for example. Like, police will stop me on the road and will tell me, I'll show them my ID card. The ID card I had at the time was from the program I was doing in the US, and they're like, are you an imposter? You're in Nigeria and you're having this ID card. The thing to do at that point is supposed to be, shake body or bring out money. My tolerance had changed, and it wasn't good because there were points where I could have been killed by the police because I was certainly unwilling to play that game. To answer your question, yes, I did feel that difference, and it happens every time I return back to a place. As much as I loved Ghana, I went in 2019. When I went back in 2022, it was jarring for me to see their custom people also asking me to give them something. I was like, did I bring this bad behavior here? They were like this literally 2 years ago. Like, what happened? Like, it was too quick of a time for you to have this bad behavior.
So that means probably like stepping out of a place is like stepping out of, like, would I say, a particular time stream into another time stream, and then it's like stepping into another different river. When you come back to this new river, the saltiness that was there, you're not used to this saltiness again. So that's how it's like rolling around in my head.
So I felt this. I remember really making a very strong note about it when I was 17 because places exist in different timelines or different like time periods.
Yeah.
Because if I going to Enugu, this was in like 2017. There are some drinks in Enugu that they will tell you in Abuja that, oh, the company has stopped producing it. Certain music that people have moved on. You go to another part of Nigeria, and that is what is currently the hit. Certain fashion styles. I got this very strong sense that like different places exist in different timelines. Nigeria is in different times. It happens in friendships too. There are certain, beliefs of fundamental things that you and I, hold dear. Maybe that is why we've been able to be friends for so long. But some of these things, decades later or a decade later, that someone will come and be like, oh yeah, that thing you said. Paying attention to how complex time is has really given me some solace, right? Like even in connections I have with people and places. Not necessarily that a place is bad or a person is bad. It's just time. We are living in very different times. I feel like my answers are like larger than your questions, but okay.
I am factoring them actually because when we add time into the place conversation, there's a lot more complexity because in your novel, especially even in the madhouse, I see it here and people live here. There's always a young woman running away from a stifling situation. The first question I always ask about Kanuya is, does she have anything in common with like the young women around her age that you saw in Makurdi? Or like in the North Central in general, because it's actually a North Central story, in fact, if I would put it that way.
I was trying to write a character who was as different from me as possible, but when I got into it, it ceased to be about even just being a. Especially in young boys, everybody was trying to run away from, on a larger scale, the doom of being born into Nigeria as a millennial, then Gen Z or whatever, right? Like everybody was trying to escape. Can you remember, like in our university, so many young people were trying to become musicians? Like, if you remember, there was a point where like recording music was a very strong business. I started my fashion design from designing clothes for some of those musicians because there were so many that it was that lucrative. It's even for me more a youth conversation than even that conversation. right? Because even Kalunia is with Ikenna, and Ikenna is making sure that he never gets poor again, or he never has to go back to Nigeria again, and so that's why he makes certain decisions that he makes, right? So, and it's from that running. So even though she's the protagonist, everybody's running away from something. Like all those doctors there, literally, they were all running from something.
Then again, it's also very crazy how, when you're running from Nigeria into aid work, it feels like a step up. The aid workers who, I think there must have the aid workers who have read this book, how did they feel about that? And then two, what does that even really say about, us as a country, us as young people, where, the war here, why is silent? Because I believe that probably it says that maybe the war here is so silent that we'll rather go and see all out war and know what to do than die slowly here. So yeah.
Halfway into writing the book, it felt like the story I was trying to tell felt like it failed, because it was like writing this book, it was going to be her going to Yemen and everything happening in Yemen and then everything ending there.
Yeah.
But then a question came, what about the things happening in her backyard? The simple answer is, if you are a local, you are going to be paid way less than what you're, and this cuts across all fields. Especially, they talk about this in finance, right? Like a corporation would want to pay the Nigerian staff what their US whatever are being paid, but then the Nigerian manager will be like, no, let's give them what's obtainable in the local region. So it's actually financially dangerous to remain in all these jobs in your own country, because but if you go elsewhere, there will be some measure of respect. And then for the aid workers who have read this book, this is the reaction that I get from actual aid workers. that like that literally is the reaction, and I get it. I understand that I don't even understand, because they can't even, your friends are having a night out in Lagos and you are pulling out dead babies on a battlefield, and you're like, yeah, let's have a weekly catch up, or let's have a monthly catch up. Yeah, all on the video call, and then people are like, oh yeah, I just got engaged, or oh yeah, I just this, and I'm like, oh yeah, how was your week? Oh yeah, it was fine. Don't worry, I'm just, how was work? Yeah, work was fine. What do you want to say? At that point, it feels like saying anything would even be like actively having your friends. So like, work is big, but yeah, yeah.
People live here carries a lot of elements of like a wartime novel. There's that whole grimness, And I read an interview where you now said that anytime you want to start a story, you start from hope. Is it one of those ironic things where it is when there's so much despair that there is hope?
For you to even tell a story about even darkness, you have to hope that, like, you're going to have to hope that it's going to be listened to. There's some tweets I would want to make now, but I'm going to be like, nobody has time for this now. I was having a conversation 3 days ago, theorizing with someone about this idea that a writer is only achieve so much with the limitation of the community they are writing from. All of this is to say that, like, for me to even believe that a story is worth telling, I have to feel hopeful. I have to hope people would even have the bandwidth to listen to it. It's why I had like a very major dry spell in 2020, where after editing People Live Here, I was going to start writing the next thing, and it just wasn't working because the world did end in many ways. Right, like with the COVID and the lockdowns, I realized that I couldn't write anymore because I didn't know if there was a world I was writing towards. That's how I think about hope with writing or making any kind of work.
Oh, okay. And then I think in another interview you also talked about being inspired by the English Patient for the structure of the Madhouse. So was it leftovers of that made this feel like like that whole wartime narration?
I didn't think about the English Patient at all. Like, it didn't even spill into it at all. Like, yeah, I can't even find any influence. Like, with the Madhouse, the English Patient kind of like gave me this kind of like patience. Like, instead of like trying to like try to carry the character through a plot, English Patient like forced me to be present and to stay inside the moment with the character. But with People Live Here, it's just like moving.
If I were to pitch this novel now, I think a comparable title would be David Diop's At Night All Blood is Black. Now it was about a soldier who they killed his friend during war, and he just has a breakdown. And then he's telling the story from the point where he's sort of like at a therapy where they are rehabilitating him. And essentially,
Yeah.
that's kind of like what Kanuria is doing. Something, they killed
Yeah.
Amira, it breaks her
Find out.
mind and everything. So I always find like this exploration of the mental state of humanity, like in your work. What are you reaching for when you write about like the mental makeup or mental response to these things?
For me, if sure a lot of my early work, I'm trying to like shake people and make people realize that there's more inside us than the social interactions we have. Like there's so much more going on. I'm trying to reach for our capacity to love and what love actually looks like. Because there's this assumption that, oh, if two people marry, then they're in love, or if somebody has a child, then they would love. Like we think love is this natural feeling that comes. But then using, the lens of mental health struggles of my characters, I'm able to really I try to really illuminate the complex world that goes on inside characters, right? Like inside all of us, really, that I feel goes by very unacknowledged in our day-to-day interactions in Nigeria, but also the world at large. And I'm like, what if we actually spoke from the heart, and listened from the heart, as opposed to the social game that we are playing, that is, the formulas that we put on ourselves.
What I believed about Afayashe is I saw Kanulia's, using that character to process her emotion. I saw like probably, I imagine that, okay, maybe that was probably like like just a worker that she met, probably had a great time with, and then that's kind of like what her brain uses to like process this. That's what I came
Mm.
around to. But while I was reading through the novel, I was very sure that he did not exist. I was very sure that she was schizophrenic. But a lot of people were like, oh, no, he existed. And I'm like, oh, okay. At the end of the story, you told me that, oh, Tafat doesn't exist. I would believe because each time he was in the scene, felt like there was like an other self that she was communicating with, split personality thing and stuff. So that was what I thought. But, other reviews made me know that, oh, maybe he was just like an aid worker that she imprinted upon. And I was like, you know what? Um, I know TJ Benson doesn't like to explain everything, but this one, I need the truth. Who is Tafa Yasser?
I think no, but I feel like if you get to the end of the novel, it should be cleared.
I think there was a part in page 77 where you end the chapter where she says, wait, I don't think that's how it happened. And I marked it as there and then was where her mind started to break. And I was like, okay, so I cannot trust anything that she's saying. So, but what was it like working with an unreliable narrator?
That was I would say, it felt very disobedient to write a character like that, because you're supposed to be doing consistency. I mean, of course, I had to first know what the reality was, and then before I could deviate from it. Also, because it's a huge risk, you don't know if it will work. But seeing how readers took it has been very rewarding, for sure. It was thrilling, that gosh, you get to do this.
Does the social technology of a nation state, that's the idea of organizing people into sovereign nations, organizing the world into nations, do you still think it has any merit, like after all that we've seen, when, fail, after we've seen it fail the past 5 years? Because I'm looking at like, the Trump era and I'm like, that's what the founding fathers thought of, but man, does it still have any merit? Do we need like probably maybe, let's just organize ourselves according to Amazon and Xiaomi?
I am not trained to be able to answer that question. I don't have the skills. I don't have the education to answer that question. Yes, my fiction, I have found uncomfortably, I might add, my fiction continues to raise that question. I don't want to answer it for people. The whole point of even adding a speculative tribe is to problematize that idea of what we know makes up a nation. Who and who gets to make up a nation? Who and who gets to be part of the national consciousness and reality, right? So I can only raise those questions. I'm not equipped enough to answer.
So stepping out of the book into, just other aspects of your being, I saw that, yeah, you are teaching the Lulway class, fiction. I saw fiction workshop too. I was like, yeah, I saw that in my email. And I don't know if you could give us, I don't know if he has started or if he hasn't, but I don't know if you give us details about that.
It's going to happen in a few weeks, and it's going to be the only fiction class I'm going to teach for a while. I just finished working on the manuscript, and then I'm going to start a historical novel. I'm going through a lot of transitions as well. So this is kind of like a more extended workshop. I have a couple of things that are working for me right now, that I'll be bringing up in the workshop as well. And I want to work alongside people because I'm also going to be, writing and editing along as well. But there are some specific things that that are interesting to me that I'm curious about to see if they'll be interested. Other people will be interested as well. You know, Looking at things like multimodal fiction, having that like multi-sensory or multi-intelligence in fiction or prose. We are looking at endings. How do stories end if they do? Come to the class and find out.
You say you've talked about like manuscripts that you have finished.
Yeah.
On the path to publishing, how far away are we?
When I get a book deal, you'll be the first person to know. I've been in school for the past 2-3 years, and so I think it's just now I'm graduating. I have time to actually start putting my work out there. So you will know. Everybody will know.
For a writer that's been on the fringes of like the nationhood of his country, do you still believe in the Nigerian experiment? Because at this point, I don't call it a state; I call it an experiment.
I will say that the older I get and the more I learn and the more I know, I will say I am more interested in really looking at it for what it really is and separating the myth from what is actually on ground. So I think right now I'm in the process of really learning how it's working, especially for people who are not from any of the major tribes. Seeing and really, seeing how it was created. When the world where it's even hard to really name and say this is what is real and this is what is fact. Just even being able to say the war that happened in Shongo Hills against the jihadists a few centuries ago, to be able to even say, name that in a casual conversation in Nigeria, it's going to be packed and heated. So for me, I'm in that stage of I want to actually see what the country actually is and see how it's functioning from, generation to generation. The things that Fela was singing about are things that I am still experiencing now. I am not in Nigeria at the moment, but I'm very much feeling the weight of its citizenship on my neck. Something many of us should be doing is really looking at, really trying to understand what it is versus what we were told it is. And this involves to know each other, talk to each other. I mean, you are from
Mada,
that's a place that people just, drive past. If I picked up somebody in the south, either southwest or southeast, they would not even know. But then they would have so much ownership over the Nigerian title when they don't even know what it's supposed to entail. And so for me, that's where I think we should really be thinking about and really unpacking. I mean, if I didn't stop by those people breaking rocks along the road, I would also just assume that, oh, this place is just Hausa or Hausa land. Yeah, I think we need to find a way to kind of become more aware of each other. For us who are from in quotes minority tribes, we really need to be thinking about being rooting ourselves or our cultural identities. If you're not, it's one thing to not be someone who wants to play the identity or culture game, but it's another thing to think that's who you are, but then your default is that majority is to play the game of the majority. Assuming a neutrality is then why you will be far inside baggy land, and the first character you can think of as a writer is somebody who has a Hausa or Igbo or Yoruba name.
That has added one more question. I'm a writer from a minority tribe, and I'm already looking at my language dictionary. I'm going to use you to write a novella one day. Do you have a TIF project, at the back of your head, that you're going to write in straight?
To write in TIF language.
Yeah.
So what I'm talking about in terms of rooting myself in my own tradition, I'm not saying I want to write in TIF. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I want to be writing about our realities, like what I did in People Live Here. Makodi shows up a bit. So it's not necessarily writing in the language. For TIF specifically, there used to be a very huge movie industry for in TIV that was really booming and selling, and people were watching in TIV. But for reading, there isn't much motivation to read TIV outside of church and outside of reading newspapers. To write a TIV novel now is going to be an interesting challenge, unless you are trying to do this sort of egotistical project. It literally can be, where are they from? Where is worthy of being written about? Who is worthy of being written about? You can even do the transliteration thing that Stay With Me, Adebayo does, where like people who read Yoruba will tell you that, oh yeah, it feels like they're reading Yoruba in English when they are reading this book, right? Or sometimes even some of our backers work, how like even the English that has, it's kind of like broken into the language the characters is from. So, and I feel like that work is worthy because it then like expands.
So, what excites you about the Nigerian readership currently?
I love that like they are finding each other. In my generation, reading wasn't a cool thing. Like reading fiction was the cool thing when I was in secondary school. So it wasn't cool to be a reader. But like I'm so excited, like even as the country continues to suffer the things it's suffering, people are still finding time to read. Even as book prices continue to soar, people are still finding time to read fiction in a time like this, and it's really encourages me. They would then like reach out to me or make time to share or recommend the work to each other. I feel so privileged that like people I will never know in Nigeria will pick up my book in a shelf, read, and then share with other people. It feels like such a privilege. Random people can just find each other through my books. It's so exciting for me.
So one of the people that was talking about attending your class, he was like, he can see that our TJ Benson is doing the class. And I was like, our TJ? And I was like, God damn, it's no longer my TJ anymore. It used to be my TJ. It used to be, oh yeah, that's Shama's TJ. Now it's our TJ. I was like, wow.
Oh my god.
No, he's so possessive. I was like, what does he
You
mean
mean
by
like
our? Whoever decided to kill trees for people live here to come to print, that was a very
Yeah.
fantastic decision on the publisher's part, because I think it's one of those complex pieces of fiction that I personally understand that it's pretty niche, because whenever people talk about it, they are like, oh, they don't really get it. And I'm like, do you live in Abuja? I'm like, okay, so if you live in Abuja, you should read this book. And if you are thinking of anything NGO work, or you are very interested in, that whole aid work in it, you should read this book, because I market it as the journal of an aid worker. And there, I think people start to like, oh, okay, I can see what that is. So, like in my review, I hope to, express that sentiment out and get people to read. So, yeah, it's lovely work. It's lovely work. Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
I personally hope to see your next novels. I mean, I read your short story on Addy Magazine. Um, I might read Bolivia, and I might probably have something else to say. So probably, hopefully, our next review, I will still have questions about People Live Here as my mind forms around this book. Okay, so this has been a pleasure as always.
But yeah,
Let's move
thank you
on.
so much for
So
interviewing.
thank you so much.